Surprise! You have a bonus video this week because I decided before we actually do the real lesson for this week, you may want a little background or you may need some help with vocab. I learned in tutorials with some of you last week. There's just a few key terms that didn't come up last year, and I really need to show you those before you jump into this week's lesson. So this is going to be a quick video. You don't have a notes guide for it, so feel free just to kick back and watch and relax. If you think this is important and you want to remember it, then just get a normal sheet of paper and take notes that way, okay? This is going to be about functions, okay? And you may or may not have heard the word functions, but basically the idea is whenever you have an equation with two variables, that have a relationship. I'm not talking about dating or anything. That would be weird. But I'm talking about like, well, just let me make up an example. Let's say that I wrote an expression like this. The cost, the total cost of the bill, I don't know, whatever you're buying here. The total cost of the bill is equal to 30 cents for each item plus $3 or something like that. Okay. So I don't really know what situation this could be, but let's say somebody's, you're trying to ring somebody up and they're shopping from you, and you know this relationship is true. Somebody's going to spend 30 cents for each item plus $3. So we worked on verbal expressions last week just for this reason. There really are two variables here, okay? Cost, the total cost, is something that's happening in this problem, and the items sold is going to be the other thing that fluctuates in this problem. So I would probably make up a variable for cost, like maybe C is cost. So the C, the total cost of the bill, remember the word is equal to 30 cents for each item. Now for item, I might use like an X. You know, use whatever letter you want. 30 cents for each item, so I would do 0.30 times X plus $3, so plus a flat $3. So if this was the relationship, I have an equation and I have two unknowns, and there is a relationship here. The amount of money that I make depends on how many items that I sell. And so just by saying that cost depends on items sold, I'm writing that down because it's important. Cost depends on items sold. That should make sense because the more you sell, the more money you'll make. So cost depends on items sold. So when you write that, that makes cost something called the dependent variable. This is maybe new, maybe not. And it makes this X the what's called the independent variable, because this depends on this guy, but this guy can really be whatever you want, okay? I could have sold 0 things or 1 thing or 2 things or 3 things, okay? So that's kind of the difference between those. And some more vocab to add to it is if your teacher doesn't call them dependent and independent, your teacher might call them, this one, it might be called the range. This one might be called the domain. Another way your teacher might say it is they may call this the output, and they might call this one the input. These all mean the same thing. These 3 things are the same thing. These 3 things are the same thing. And why is this important before you do today's lesson? Well, the reason it's important is because we are going to do graphing. And when you graph, you have an x-axis and a y-axis, and where these numbers come from for today's graphing has to do every bit with this. Because when you are doing output, it is the y variable, And when you are doing input or domain or independent variable, it is the x variable. okay? So how would this work? Well, here's the example. I could make a chart over here of X's and Y's and just play pretend. So X is the total items sold, right? So if I sold 0 items, then the Y would be my output. Now, in this problem, it's written as a C, okay? But when you go to graph it, it really is the Y variable. So if I plug in a 0 here and I do the math, well, 30 cents times 0 plus 3 is just 3. But if I sold 1 item, then 1 times 30 cents plus 3 would be $3.30. If I sold 2 items, that would be 60 cents, so $3.60, and so on and so forth, okay? And then you learned last year how to graph a point, the point 0.03, the point 1, $3.30, 2, $3.60. So it would form these little dots, and they'd end up looking like this. And if we played connect the dots, it would be some kind of a line, okay? Now, that's what today's lesson is going to be. In today's lesson, instead of making a chart and doing every single little dot, okay, I'm just going to show you how to take something that already looks like this and graph it. You're going to already be able to do the line that goes with it. But I wanted you to understand that if today's lesson doesn't make sense, this video is an explanation of what's really going on in the background. So in the background, we could pick numbers for the X, plug them in, and get the Y's, and you would see that they laid on this line. So there's your vocab lesson of the day, your introduction, and now please move on to the real video of the day with your notes guide.